Welcome again to Kanwe Wanya broadcast. This is Sangwadzi Spiweka Chinzama Puma. I'm back, and today I brought another guest here, another ordinary person who's doing extraordinary with my dear friend Ray Mawerera. Ray, I've known him for a long time. Ray, he made his name in journalism and wrote. We worked together. He really did make a name for himself as a brilliant writer, and later on went into public relations. And I know a lot of young people who went into PR during the late 80s, 90s. They probably went through his tutorship because he became a PR consultant, somebody who has done quite well in that area. But above all, Ray has just has an incredible gift of telling stories. And is a writer, and now wrote the book Zagamo, which is very, very interesting. We'll get into that later. Ray, welcome to Kanwe Wanyai broadcast, and say hello to our followers.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. So, the story that we are talking about here, the Zagamo, it's almost a sad story, but it's talking about an issue, a topic which is quite relevant in our communities. It's a social illness which we have, which maybe how I look at it is it's like a heavy cloud which has been hanging over our communities for over 40 years, really, since the independence of Zimbabwe. It talks about the story of a young man whose life was interrupted by the war, went into the war, and came back a different person. We're talking of PTSD. We are talking about things that maybe we didn't have a name for, and we knew something is happening. Go ahead, tell me, what is it? What is the story of Zagamo?
You summarized it pretty well, Spew. So you read the book, right?
Yes,
so,
of course.
so, so pretty much PTSD and the things that we haven't dealt with, like you rightly say, or on post-traumatic stress. There are a lot of people going around carrying heavy things. You will know as well as I do that in the at the height of the war, in the late 70s, especially, a lot of young people went to the war when they were barely in their teens, and they saw a lot of things there, some of which we haven't dealt with. But what I decided to do was to situate that issue from a fictional perspective. Um, as a person who didn't go to war myself, I was too young, but I saw our big brothers going out there, and they did come back. A lot of them did come back different. But so the plot of the story is around a young man who um, sees his whole family wiped out by the um, invasion forces who have now occupied the country, and they wipe out his entire family when he's a little boy, uh, about 8 or so years old. And his uncle, the big brother to his father, takes him away from that environment and brings him to the big city. And that's where the protagonist who's writing the story now, who's telling the story of this young man, meets him when he comes to the big city. And what strikes him, because this is a giant of a boy, because of uh, genetics and where he's coming from. What strikes him is that there's something peculiar about that boy, because then they come into his family and they're staying together with these guys, but he's having these nightmares, constant nightmares, and so they grow up together. So the book is about the boy Dexter telling the story of this new boy Zagamo who's come into their life, and how he's having these nightmares. And then at some point he disappears, and then he finds out that he's gone to the war. So basically, what Zagamo is trying to do is that he's been fighting these demons, okay, and then he thinks that the solution, because his uncle also then gets arrested for gun running, but he thinks that the solution is to go out there and fight the system from outside. And he's only 16 years old. But when he goes there, it's another traumatic experience.
Mhm.
Now, Dexter was telling the story because he hasn't gone with Zagamo. He can only tell the story from his own perspective. So there's gaps which we don't know. So what happened while these guys are out there? And why is he come back like this? And he says, I don't like war because it interferes with people's minds. Then Zagam, I'm trying not to tell the whole story because I want people.
You want the people to read the book, and
I
of
want
course,
people
but we
to
just
read.
want to do a
But at the
synopsis.
end of the day, what then happens? So it's got a whole lot of in those gaps. You've got a whole lot of little bits and pieces about the township where Dexter grows up, because it's set in a township where most of the nationalism was happening. Highfield.
Mhm,
So it takes you through Highfield, it takes you through the Zimbabwe grounds, Machu Picchu, and everything. So it's got a bit of geography, history,
mhm, mhm,
some tourism stuff in there, but it also puts things in perspective in terms of the political environment and what was happening at the time, which at the time that he's writing. So the story is kind of coming of age because you're talking
mhm,
about someone who's telling a story from when he was 10 years old
mhm.
up until post independence when Zagamo
Okay.
comes back.
Okay, that's interesting because you touched on something which in the book I thought was quite interesting because we did an anthology. Me and
Mm,
some friends, Wadzanai Garwe and Nom Sam, yeah, and Farai Pisaunga and all those. We did an anthology of life during the time
mm.
when all this was happening, and then Zagamo went away, life in the township.
Township
But
girls.
Township Girls, yeah, we it's an anthology of 31 women who wrote that
Yes.
anthology of life in the in the townships and what it was um, during that time. Yeah,
Yes.
we call Township Girls the crossover generation, and this is a crossover story in the
It is.
sense that yes, that Zagamo, when he went to the war, what he experienced, you can never explain it to somebody, a young 16-year-old of today. They have
Mm,
no idea.
mhm.
What they are experiences are the impact of the life that Zagamo went through and the
Absolutely.
PTSD. And sometimes in our culture, we have no words for experiences like that, like
Absolutely.
PTSD. And so as a result, we tend to quickly revert to what we know best, thinking of midzimu kana kuti how can I call it?
Goes.
Kumukirwa nezvakaitika
Goes.
ngozi, that's right, nengozi, kumukirwa nezvakaitika during the war. And
Mm,
maybe it's true, but in general, it's it's something that happens when people go through such trauma as Zagamo did, and he's
mhm,
not the only one. We worked with a lot of people who had the same experiences.
mm.
Like you said,
So
you didn't go there, you were young.
I was
You were
young.
young. You were too young.
Mm.
I was away myself, but when I came back, I worked. When we worked at Ziana, I
I
worked with
remember.
a lot. Yeah, we had gone and come back, and they were different from when they went.
Mm, mm. So you'll see the subtitle of the book is called "The War Within,"
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
mental war
Hmm.
that he's going through. So where he thinks he's going to solve a problem, he actually goes and compounds the problem. So he
Hmm.
doesn't solve it, and this is why it's not such a happy story.
No.
Mm.
It's
But
a necessary it's a necessary experience. We need to talk about it. We
mhm,
don't want to talk about unhappy. Nobody wants to talk about unhappy story. And I'm really, it's just your gift of crafting this book into something digestible, something you can't
mm,
put down. You want to know, you want to read, you want. It's not a happy story. It's not like, hey, we went to whatever, but it's
mm,
something that we need to face. We need to
mm,
face it and understand
mm,
exactly what's going on. It goes beyond just Zagamo coming back a different person. We are seeing a lot of things. Our social life has changed. We're seeing a lot
true.
of drug abuse. We're seeing a lot of things which we never, particularly myself, when we're growing up, we didn't have those things. And we are talking about the likes of Zagamo having their own children, and that it's not a curse. It's an ill which has not been addressed, which maybe has spilled over to the
Mm,
generation 40 years later. As I said, it's a heavy thing hanging for 40 years and it has never really truly been addressed. Could
and
that
and
be?
that was precisely part of what I was intending for the book to do, uh, put the spotlight on this issue, because precisely because we have not dealt with it. As far as I'm concerned, I don't think
Mhm,
we've dealt with it to the point where we can say we've created a social safety net, psychological safety net that deals with these kinds of things. And then on top of that, now you have all these social ills that are coming and compounding all of that.
mhm,
um, and so the problem gets bigger and bigger. But so when you see people vachingoputika
mhm,
for no apparent reason,
mhm,
short fuses and all that,
mhm,
and you say, what is going on here? And then you find that the mental health experts are emphasizing a lot of health and wellness, and talking about how we need to look at these issues at a holistic level, not just
mhm.
depression on its own, drug abuse on its own. How, as a nation, are we dealing with these things? Because we can lose a whole generation.
Which is sad. And I think it just comes up at a very important time in our lives. We
Mm,
need to look back into what caused what we're going through right now.
mm,
Because if we try to have a band-aid solution of just like kind of like covering what's there and it's festering, I think Zagamo is a book which is in our face, in our face. Even the government has to look at it as a curriculum of what it is. But then, personally, I think it's important to have people who will be able to explain it, because our younger people, the generation which in grade 6, grade 7 right now, they are like two generations move forward. They have
I
no
don't know.
idea of what the
They
war
have no
is.
idea. They have no idea. Yeah, one of the things that happened at the launch was that one of the brothers, my Wandaita Namkoma,
Mhm,
who um, has been trying to do something to give an outlet to his comrades.
mhm,
Saka, they set up a platform where these guys just let out, and nostalgic trips, and what
mhm.
happened. But he was saying that there are some things that they think that they dare not talk about, because they're too heavy on in their heads to be talking about openly, because they as Zagamo, they saw a lot. And you try and imagine a teenager who's barely, I mean, the school has been disrupted, and then they go out there, and then they come back, and because by the time they come back, which is 16 years later, all their peers have been to school, they've done their masters, they're now in big jobs in these corporates and everything, and there's no way he can play catch up.
No,
But now we're
no.
saying you're illiterate. Now we're saying to them you're illiterate.
It's a painful story, this Zagamo. You know what I mean?
Hmm,
Because I know a lot of Zagamos and people who have sacrificed a lot, who have
hmm.
been impacted negatively to a large extent, and have had children, because the Zagamos now are in their late 50s and 60s, some of them now,
Hmm. Hmm.
and
We have
still
met
their
them.
story,
Mm,
their stories unheard. But like you're saying, this your brother, your Mkoma, who has a lot of friends who have gone through this. They're now old people, right? They're now
mhm.
old people, but trauma can never age. It can
It
age you,
doesn't.
but no, but itself it can age you, but it doesn't age. It's somewhere, it's somewhere. It's always
Mm,
there. It knows where to find you. It's there with you, and I
mm.
think it's a great move to start a peer group like he's doing, and get
Yeah,
more and more Zagamos to not to shout out to the world, but to talk about it.
I think that's the kind of therapy that he came up with. But initially, he says that he was just looking for the guys that were in his detachment, and
Mm,
just bringing them together and say, guys, here we are. We've got this little group. Let's just talk. And then others then said, but there are others that were not in our detachment that we think that this is important. Let's bring them all together and share. So the
mhm,
group has been growing exponentially over the last few months. And some of the stuff that you see in there, you just shake your head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The things that they still remember,
They
still
still
they still
remember.
talk about, and
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
And then
I
they're also trying to situate themselves in a new Zimbabwe, part of which now doesn't appreciate them anymore
no,
because they don't know what they're talking about.
yeah, they
Does
don't
it
know.
does it matter anymore?
And we hear a lot of people who talk like that, like, you know what, we don't want to be told about this war thing, and you know, and I'm not making a point that it should be like that, but I'm just saying what is out there. People who just like, okay, look, we gotta cut the loss and move on, right? But
Mm.
it's easier said by those who were not the Zagamos, people whose life was totally devastated and destroyed to a large extent, for us to be where we are.
You
And
know,
what does
someone.
he, Zagamo and his friends, they sit there and they watch this um these people talk like that.
Yeah, yeah. Someone says 44 years after independence, and you're writing a story about the war. And
Yes.
I, and I said, yes, but it's not exact. It's about a different war this time
Yeah. The war
because
inside.
the war inside, the war within.
Mhm.
Because now we are saying, but what have we done about it?
Mhm.
And when we see these guys seemingly losing their temper over small things,
Mhm.
we don't know what's going on inside their heads.
It's so important. I mean, it's a time, it's a reflection. That's how I see it. What you did to write about the war, you can't write about diving and ducking and sleeping under. You can't, because you didn't. You were not there.
Hmm.
But you can talk about what you observe, what you remember,
Mm.
yeah, what you remember seeing as a young person, or hear people talking about. And I know the time, I'm a little older than you are, Ray, and I
Mm.
do remember when we're in high school, when schools, St. Albert's, I always remember St. Albert's, you know, when these kids just overnight the whole school was gone. Those kids were like 14, 15. They were about my age that time, right?
So in the story, you've got a little bit of that where Dexter's brother
Hmm.
is at a mission school,
Hmm.
and so he and his classmate, his primary school classmate, were at that mission school, and then the school is disrupted by
Yeah.
this intervention, and it's closed. So they come back. So you've got that whole little bit of history, but from the perspective of someone who was not at the school when it was closed, but
Hmm.
knows that my brother and my friend came back because their school was closed. Meantime, my other friend has crossed over to go and fight.
Yeah. Right. You know this.
So, but still, I just want to say this, that when you're reading the story itself, it's I mean, it's now that we're analyzing it, and
Yeah.
we're going as deep as this. But I tried to be conversational because this is me being the character that's telling the story.
Yeah.
So there's light-hearted moments in it. There's like I said, trips around the township. There's little games that boys play, and then they start. So the difficulty for me was to try and find a child's voice and then temper that and growing into an adult
Yeah.
voice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not easy.
I can imagine.
Mm,
Challenging.
yeah.
Challenging. But I mean, you know what? I mean, it just goes to show your ability to story tell. It's a gift. I mean, you know, people can write. I mean, people can write stories, but
Mm,
ability to go through, to navigate that, in
yes.
the ups and down, and suddenly you are Dexter, a young person, and
Hmm.
then you're Zagamo, a person full of stuff that is frightening to even open up. It's scary.
Mm,
Yeah, you feel for him, and you love you know, Zagamo and his strength and what he's gone through. But on
mm,
the other hand, you're almost afraid. You are almost afraid, you know, that he's going to boom. Yeah, and of which he
mm.
should. Of which he
Yeah.
should.
So there's incidences where these boys now are asking, because the war has ended, but they're not seeing Zagamo. And they're saying, so did he make it? Where is
Yeah.
he? Is he going to come back? And so that whole period is talking about the time when these guys come back, but they have to be put in assembly points for demobilization and reorientation into the new country's combined army. And then it becomes a tragic story from there. I'm not going to tell, but you need to read
I
the
know
book.
people have to buy the book. Tell me, where can people buy the book, and so they know where to go and buy it.
There's a Kindle.
Mhm.
You can get a Kindle, or you can go get the paperback on Amazon.
Mhm.
Just look for Zagamo. You'll
Yeah.
find it. Yeah.
Okay, so people who are listening to the story of Zagamo, you can get it on Kindle, you can get it on Amazon. I got mine on Amazon and had to kind of like quickly zap through it, but it's it's intense, and like you said, it's not a happy story, but it's a story that needs to be read. It needs to be said. It's a story that needs to be said, and really for young people who read, you can't grow unless you know where you're coming from. And stories such as this, I mean, we had the likes of Dambudzo Marechera, Stanley Nyamfukudza, and Tsitsi Nangare. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm smiling because you're taking me back.
Yeah. But see, all these people, they wrote their pieces of how they saw it, and that time it was more that time soon after independence, right? And yes, and it was still quite fresh, and yes, we wanted to hear more. And then some people tried to write about stories and some people just didn't. Yeah, but I think I'm liking this, that 40 years later is a good time to reflect, and let's talk about it, and most of the way you are bringing a social issue that we might not have talked about, but when you read Zagamo, you see it.
So I the format I used was, I pictured myself sitting with my Vasakuru
Kids.
there. So I start
Or your
off
grandkids.
so start off by telling them where I grew up and how I grew up. So that's how I put the character Dexter together. So Dexter is the one that's telling the story. Dexter is the boy that meets Zagamo, befriends Zagamo. Then they make a threesome, and then the story is told from there.
What do your grandkids say when you kind of like try to bring it? Say, hey, Sekuru wrote this book, and they say, oh, who's Zagamo? What are they saying?
So far, they've only expressed excitement that Sekuru is a writer.
Yeah. Well, but your grandson is a grandson who is also in the arts.
Yeah, he hasn't read the book yet, but
Okay.
I'm sure if he does, he's going to enjoy it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he creates his own stories as well,
Yeah.
so it's going to be interesting what he thinks.
Yeah, but it's just so I'm glad that somebody in your family also is into the arts and loves writing and reading, and we want to see another Mawerera somewhere there writing another book, and and
Yeah,
moving forward, because
yeah, it's quite an artsy family, our family. So we've got my young brother. He's a painter, a
okay,
fine artist.
okay.
One of
Where,
my
where where did you get it from? Like the love for reading and writing. Who are your mentors? I met you when you were just start. We all were just kind of like starting with journalism.
Mm.
But how did you get into writing?
It's family. We grew up on books
Yeah,
and music. So you would always find a member of the family holding a book,
yeah.
right?
Zagamo. Yeah, lift it and let me see your Zagamo so that people can see. Yeah, that's the
You
book,
see?
The War Within by Ray Mawerera. For
Mm.
those who want to go and buy the book, there it is. Tell us, go ahead. You were telling us
So
about
we grew up on a diet of books,
Mhm.
and so you learn to I was when I was a kid, I used to read the Famous Five, the Hardy Boys. Then you transition and you start reading much
Mhm.
more serious stuff. But we grew up on that diet, and then you then learn the art because everyone, my grandparents, my parents, they were always telling us little stories.
Mhm.
So the art of storytelling is in the family, and so you grow up with this keenness. Um,
Mhm.
uh, I didn't know about what I really wanted to do. But when the opportunity to take up journalism as a career came up, I grabbed it very quickly. And it was just like jumping into water
Yeah.
with a fish, and I
Yeah.
just swam.
Well, that's good. I mean, if something is for you, you don't
Mm,
need pushing. You really
mm,
don't. And sometimes it comes much earlier in life, and sometimes much later. But you always know what you want to do.
yes, exactly.
You always know what you want to do.
So the background, just to get back, the background helped a lot.
Mhm.
And it was easy.
What other books have you written?
I haven't. This was the first one.
This is your first book.
This is my first book of fiction.
Okay, but
I was just
there have
reading
been
other
some
people,
publications. You've done some publications and stuff, but not a book.
not a book.
Wow. Congratulations. Congratulations. This is
Thank you.
um I sure wish I was there at your book launch because I saw it on Facebook, and you had the music and the traditional I really like that, and I thought that was who was your MC?
Chipo Mashingaidze, you should know Chipo.
Yes, that was I was like, wow, I would have wanted to be there, because
Yeah.
that was really well done.
So,
And
so I had Chipo as MC, I had Hope Masike as the
mhm,
entertainer,
mhm.
and I had Dr. Ignatius Mabasa as my guest of honor. Dr.
Well,
Ignatius
you had the
Mabasa is,
best.
oh yeah, he's a crazy man. You remember he did, I don't think he minds me saying that, but he insisted on doing his PhD in Shona
I read that.
and succeeded.
But you know what? That's a gift there. I tried to write a book in Shona too.
Mm.
Hey, 7 years I'm on chapter one.
So he did. I wish I could share it. I don't have it with me. But he did a very interesting analysis of the book of Zagamo,
Mhm.
which even myself as a writer, I said, yeah, of course. But when I was writing it,
Didn't quite come out that way in your mind.
yeah. So
Yeah.
he brings out other because he's Dr. Mabasa. And,
Who are some of your favorite writers, Zimbabwe writers? You've got a whole. You've
there's
got
a
a
whole lot.
whole.
Of course, you'd have to start with Charleston Mungoshi and Chenjerai Hole.
Of course.
Yeah. And then Shima Chinojga, Wilson Katillo,
Mhm.
uh, Tsitsi.
Mhm.
But you can see all that, it's an
Yeah.
era of people
Yeah, but
from
those were
Congo.
greats. Those
Yeah.
people. Yeah, and they
And, and,
dared.
and and I happened to be secretary of the Writers Union around that time when the book, the Zimbabwe Writers Union was Zimbabwe Writers Association was
Mhm.
quite big with
Yeah,
our book fair and everything, and you would meet all these international
yeah.
iconic African writers, your Chinuas
Mhm.
or Ngugi wa Thiong'o, and they would come here and for the book fair. Oh yeah, this
Yes.
was and
Is it
and
still going on, the book fair? Are they still
the book
holding the
fair is
book
still
fair?
going on. It's kind of, for me, it's kind of lost its luster of that time.
It's still, yeah.
That interaction that you had with your famous authors and the
Yeah.
public readings,
Yes,
those things that Dambudzo was famous for.
of course. Oh, how can we ever forget Nambuzo Maretira,
Dambudzo,
please?
I interviewed him for a newspaper story. It was
And
quite
then you'd
something.
go, and then you go on. That guy was genius, man.
Yeah,
All these other
he was
things and
he
well
was
read.
way ahead of his generation,
Yes,
unfortunately.
definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Well,
Mm.
Ray, it was fantastic talking to you and to Chitandara and talking about your book Zagamo, and really well done. And Makorokoto, would like to see
Thank you
more
so much.
books coming from you. This is brilliant. And to all those people who are following us, go get your copy of Zagamo. Support Ray wherever he is talking about this book. Go and listen, go and talk about this. Is a very important topic, and we know a lot of people who have been suffering from PS,
PTSD, tongue tied.
PTSD. Yes, and it's very I can't overemphasize the importance of understanding where this came from and what some of the things we're experiencing now, where it comes from. And thank you so much. And have a fantastic evening. I'm having a lovely afternoon here. It's cold, but not too bad. But anyway, I will catch up with you later. And thank you so much for coming. And to our listeners, have a wonderful evening.